Once you get to the age of 80 and above, half the people at that age need physical support. About 1 in 4 people about that age will have dementia.
But let's not make them redundant. We have to understand that they still have a lot of productivity left in them. They have a wealth of experience.
So I think 60 is probably not where we should think about this is sort of your end of your working life. That's just far too early. Basically, I think for many people continue to work through to 70.
In South Korea, 25% of over 80 years old population are still working.
1 in 2 of those people will need somebody there to support them, whether it's just to wash or to eat or to dress. Many of these older people don't live with younger children, right? And sometimes those children are abroad.
So there has to be support systems. Similarly for children also, even if it is not a full-time daycare or a facility like that, there could be some play groups or at the community level where it is not so expensive. And then we can repurpose these older people to be involved in these community centers.
Hello and welcome to Leaving No One Behind, the special podcast series brought to you by UNFPA Sri Lanka together with NewsFirst. Now today we are going to take a closer look at something that very quietly but surely shapes almost every home in Sri Lanka. How our families, how our communities and our futures are changing as Sri Lanka gets older, has fewer children and also sees more people leaving the country in search of brand new beginnings. From aging parents to young couples who are unsure if they want to stay or leave, and to the families who try to hold it all together from afar. What exactly do these shifts mean to how we live, how we work, and how we care for one another? And what exactly can we do now in order to shape a future where no one is left behind? Well, to help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by 2 individuals who know these realities inside and out. Allow me to introduce them to you. We have Dr. Ravindra P, Rannan-Eliya, Executive Director of the Institute of Health Policy. And also, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Bilesha Weeraratne, Research Fellow and Head of Migration and Urbanization Policy Research at the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. Hello and welcome to Leaving No One Behind.
Thank you.
Well, today we will be exploring what exactly is next for Sri Lanka's demographic future, the journey, and what exactly it will take for us to build a future where no one is left behind. Let's begin. Dr. Ravi and Dr. Bilesha, let's start off with a memory, if you let me. Let's talk about how Sri Lankan families used to be back then. Extended families, large families, big households, so full of life and so much energy in it. But things have really changed. What exactly are the differences that have particularly stood out to you from back then and now?
All right, I'll go first. So I've heard a lot of stories how my house used to be very full because I was at the tail end of this multi-generational extended family setup in Sri Lanka. So my mom had been taking care of both my grandparents and both my grandfathers and a grand aunt. And there had been a lot of cousins of my parents at home to take care of the kids. And there had been a lot of support in the care activities. And the houses have been full and a lot of life, as you said. But what I remember is how it changed. This extended multi-generation turned into a nuclear household and how my parents started taking care of us all by themselves. But fortunately, I had my mother's siblings next door to us. So I had my lokuama and my mama in the neighborhood. So the care was still not a problem at that point because we could always walk into their house for childcare if my mother or father had to go somewhere. But now being a parent, I find it very difficult to manage it all by myself within the nuclear family. So I reach out to my sister a lot, and we don't have neighbors as such that we can reach out to like before during my mom's day. But my sister is still my neighbor, so that is fortunate for me. So a little bit of change is there, but we try to keep it remembering how my mom and my lokuama used to be. So me and my sister, we try to share the burden a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have somewhat similar memories. I mean, if I think about my grandparents, I can only remember really one. I think there were two who were alive after I was born, and I know I remember staying with my Archie and my grandmother quite often. At some point, when my parents were not here or whatever, and yeah, she lived in a big house, and there were lots of people always staying. It could be uncles or aunts or cousins of my mother who would be staying there as well. So it was quite an extended group, and there was an annex, and then there was other people staying who weren't even related. And so that was sort of, I think, that 2 generations ago. And then my parents migrated. So we did end up in a nuclear family without any of that support. Of course, that was abroad. Now I'm back here and an even smaller nuclear family. So its family sizes have clearly got much smaller. At least I think, at least 3 of my certainly my mother and my two of my in-laws are still alive. So that's in a sense a difference. So people are living longer. That's a good thing. But certainly there's this disappearance of the people living together in this kind of extended communities. And I think that's clearly the big change. And I think also, just to comment on that, I think the migration issue, which you mentioned, it's been quite extensive. We probably come from relatively privileged backgrounds, and it's the more educated people, the better off, who've left the country often permanently. And if I think about my mother's siblings, basically only 2 of them are here. She had a lot of siblings because they were big families, but most of the siblings went. And in fact, all of my first cousins are abroad. So I don't have any first cousins in Sri Lanka anymore. So I think that's also reflects both the migration and the contraction of family size.
It's a big shift from what we used to see back then to what we see now.
Yeah.
So now we have some stats here. It's not too technical, but we have some details here. It's said that by 2041, 1 in 4 Sri Lankans will be over 60. At the same time, recent data also shows that the life expectancy in Sri Lanka has actually declined over the last few years. So what exactly does this aging population and falling life expectancy, the combination, mean for how we work, for how we care for each other, and plan our health and social systems moving forward as a country?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think there are lots of things you mentioned there which probably have to be unpacked. I think in terms of the population getting older, which is mostly a function of the fact that life expectancy has gone up over the long run. There is some specific issue since COVID that life expectancy has been falling, but that's I'll leave that to later. But in terms of the population getting older, the big change is obviously there are going to be a bigger share of the population who are above the age of 60, as you mentioned, and not just 60. I think, to be honest, at the age of 60, many people are still not really old. I think that's probably a bad term to use to describe those people. But certainly if you get to the age of 80, right? Generally what we know from the rest of the world is once you get to the age of 80 and above, about half the people at that age need physical support. So they need somebody around them because they're physically limited in what they can do, or they have increasingly dementia. So about 1 in 4 people above that age will have dementia, right? So that's a problem that's becoming certainly very visible to me in terms of people that I know and their parents. That's becoming very common. So I think it's really that older age group that's going to cause, I think, significant challenges. And I think the other part of it is that we have far fewer children. And so far fewer people, let's say of working age, whatever that means, who are able to look after this older population. And then the other thing I would mention is migration is, in a sense, making that even worse, because it's typically, as you said at the beginning, young people. And, right now it's the young educated people who most of all, not only want to leave, but are most able to leave, right? Because they can get jobs abroad, they have skills. And that's sort of hollowing out our workforce, our economy, and in a sense, making things even worse. So I think it's quite a negative impact. So yes, I think this is the challenge. We face a much older population, and we will be facing these challenges, how we look after them, but also we face the challenge, how do we create the wealth to look after them well and to raise living standards?
I agree with Ravi on many things, but I'm a little curious. What is so big about 60? right? We will be hitting it in a couple of years, maybe. So we feel very young at heart. Maybe 60 was set some time ago when the life expectancy was not so much. But now people have a lot of medical advances and people age differently. So maybe we should change a little bit and not be, of course, understand the statistic that 1/4 of the population will be over 60. But let's not make them redundant. We have to understand that they still have a lot of productivity left in them and they have a wealth of experience. So we have to carve out a way to find a way to carve out their expertise out and not make them redundant. As I said, people age differently. So some people who are in physically demanding occupations might need to be considered that they are hitting this threshold of 60 and they might not be able to contribute that much. So we should have flexible retirement policies and flexible work arrangements to allow this population to still be productively engaged and not become dependent and redundant, I suppose.
I really like that Dr. Bilesha touched on that. That actually brings me to my next question. So many people happen to see this aging population as a burden, but in fact, it's quite the opposite. They carry with them so much experience, so much wisdom, and they can definitely contribute to the society in ways that many people actually fail to see. So how can we make sure that we include them in society? And I actually mentioned a few methods, but I'd like to bring your attention specifically to that topic so we can dive a bit more in detail to it. How exactly can we make this aging population feel more included?
Well, I think one of the things which Bilesha just mentioned is we have this system where people basically are forced to stop working, right, at 60 or maybe 65. And many of those people, not everyone, but many of them are in a position to continue working, right? And so I think that's a major challenge, and it's a policy challenge because it is actually quite difficult, I think, for political reasons in most countries to really talk about raising retirement ages and getting people to retire early. It's a very sensitive topic often. And we can see in Europe in the past 2 decades, I mean, governments have fallen because of attempts to raise the retirement age. So that's a major challenge. But I think helping people either because they can work longer in their current jobs or because they have other opportunities to contribute part-time or in flexible ways after, let's say, whatever age we're talking about, I think is one. So I think 60 is probably not where we should think about this is sort of your end of your working life. That's just far too early. And I think realistically in the next half century, we should be thinking about 70. And there will be some people who can't, they do manual work or they have hard kind of working lives. They may have to retire earlier. But basically, I think for many people, continue to work through to 70 will not only something they might want to do, but it will be socially desirable because we all benefit from, as you said, their experience or wisdom and their contributions. But I think it also makes them contributing members of society, as opposed to thinking, oh, these are people that we have to, that they're a burden on us. That they shouldn't be a burden in that sense.
Similar thoughts. I think one thing is we should revisit the retirement age, even though it is hard to implement something in the short term. Right now, I think the public sector is mainly 60 years of age or 63 for some specialized skill groups. And private sector says 60 is the minimum retirement age. So we can revisit this and bump it up a little bit to be consistent with providing a longer productive life for workers. And then we don't need to be so set in our work arrangements. With the COVID pandemic, we've evolved into these flexible work arrangements and telecommuting or virtual working. So that sort of arrangements will really help people to phase out of work rather than an abrupt stop at 60. And they will also feel valued and they can contribute. And especially with this virtual and platform economy, some of these physical difficulties that people face with age can be compensated if they don't have to go to work daily but can work from home. So that sort of opportunities have to be increased. And I think in South Korea, 25% of over 80 years old population are still working. So
they're definitely contributing.
Quarter of the over 80 population are still working. So we have to think a lot. But and if we have an aging population and we have not enough skills within the economy and we know these issues, so we should not let go of our experienced workers so soon. We can repurpose them to train the youth or engage in various ways and remain contributing to the economy.
One thing I would just add to that is this issue of flexible work opportunities, right? Which I think once you get to that point, maybe, yes, you can work, but maybe you can't do the full, 40 hours or whatever per week. So you need something a bit more flexible. And it always strikes me, I mean, you mentioned Korea. Whenever I go to Singapore through the airport, you'll notice all these people in the airport in Changi are probably in the 70s who are doing these little jobs in the airport, because Singapore has created opportunities to take their older adults and get them in, give them some part-time employment, right? Doing something useful. And you come here, you never see that. And it's not just a question of flexibility for older people. We actually don't have many flexible work opportunities for anyone, right? Even younger adults. And I think particularly for women, that's a big issue, right? And so this thing about the economic challenges of aging populations, and meaning that there's, let's say, fewer people who can work versus the number of people who can't work, that problem in our case is exaggerated or accentuated by the fact that many of our women cannot work. Or not when I say cannot, they do not actually work because the opportunities don't exist, incentives don't exist for them to be in the workforce. And in fact, one of the things we have to do, that we could do to address part of these challenges, is to get women into work. But that requires this is not just about older people, it's about a whole system of other changes.
There's a whole lot of changes that need to come entailed with it. I understand. Now, with the aging population growing, care becomes part of daily life. And of course, that responsibility falls onto the family, their loved ones, their closest circle, most often women. How exactly can we provide them that support for them to care for this growing aging community without, by making sure that they're not left behind and making sure that they're not feeling overwhelmed by that requirement for care?
Yes, I mean, I think that is the burgeoning question, which I think as a society we have not really dealt with or even fully understood. So I did mention to you, it's not really the age of 60 that's the kind of threshold. I mean, it's once you get into your 80s. So we're going to have a lot of people who live into their 80s and 90s and hundreds, right? And as I said, one in two of those people will need somebody there to support them, whether it's just to wash or to eat or to dress, to make their meals. So it's a human being. And half of them will be suffering from dementia. So again, they need some little care to keep, to look after them. Now, the number of people who are aged over 80 right now is quite small. It's about 2%, right? But it's going to, by 2050, that's 25 years from now, it's going to be 6%. So 1 in 16 of the people in this country will be in that age group. And we have to date, as I guess for thousands of years, we've done that by using the family or the neighbors, the people in the village to look after these people. That's not really going to suffice as we move forwards. And I think there are two specific barriers we face. One is that I think we're still of the mindset, I don't think we fully appreciate how big this problem is going to get, right? So that's one. But I think the other thing is that we still have this mindset, certainly amongst policymakers, but we're some kind of Asian culture and we don't have to worry about this because our families will look after us, or that's how it should work. Completely forgetting that, with migration or with nuclear families, many of these older people don't live with younger children, right? And sometimes those children are abroad. And there's certain parts of the country, particularly like Jaffna, a lot of older people, the younger people are no longer there, right? So they have no younger family members anywhere near, right? So that's not necessarily going to work. But then if we're going to have solutions to that, and this is where I think this idea that we're Asian is somehow different, which is not true, we haven't made that realization that we will need some kind of, I would say, government intervention to essentially, we had to figure out how to pay for formal care. And that's what in other countries, we talk about long-term care. And I think there's very little appreciation, I think, in the policy level amongst politicians, amongst bureaucrats, even amongst experts right now, even amongst doctors, some of my professional colleagues about that problem. And we are a bit behind right now countries in Southeast and East Asia. So if I go to Vietnam, if I go to China, if I go to Japan, of course they're thinking about this. But I think right now we're not thinking about it, so it's very hard to make policy. But I think ultimately we're going to have to confront the fact that we are going to have to employ people, not rely on unpaid work essentially, or within the family. We're going to have to employ people to provide care for large numbers of people. And we're talking about lakhs of people will have to be employed for this. And we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And right now there is no money. It cannot be paid for most people privately. I mean, my family is affluent enough. Probably most people, you and your family is probably affluent enough. Maybe we can cope with our own resources. But for the average Sri Lankan, they're not going to be able to cope. And so what more developed, I would say more capitalist countries have done is they use public intervention, they use public money to provide some kind of support to pay people. And I think that also gets to this issue of women, which you mentioned, right? So right now, let's be honest, it falls, often the burden falls on the women in the family, right? Because that's just the nature of society. But and that's one of the reasons I think women don't go to work, because and it's not just in the old days of looking after the kids, and now it's looking after the parents. So the burden has shifted, and we want some of these women to work. We want more of them to work. So I think we have to figure out ways to help women not only go into the workforce, but one way you have to do is we have to solve this problem. We can't just rely on families looking after their loved ones. That's not going to work in the long run. I mean, we need a mindset change.
So I think women, unfortunately, are disproportionately burdened with this care burden, caring for children as well as caring for elderly. One thing we see is that there are very limited care options outside the household, whether it's in the community or whether it's in the marketplace. If it is in the marketplace, it's going to be very expensive, as Ravi correctly said. It's going to be difficult to, many find it difficult to afford. So there could be many arrangements that are brought about for the care arrangement that will in effect help the women who are finally having the burden of taking care of older people and younger people. So some could be not permanent, like places for people to be residing, older people to be residing, but maybe daycares, not even daycares, like community places or clubs and societies, so that they can go and be engaged for a couple of hours. And then the woman who's taking care of this elderly person is not 24/7, but there's a break and they can plan accordingly. But right now, when there is no help, they become overwhelmed and there is no place to go to. So there has to be support systems. Similarly for children also, even if it is not a full-time daycare or a facility like that, there could be some play groups or at the community level where it is not so expensive. And then we can repurpose these older people to be involved in these community centers for kids, because it's a nice match, because older people are kind of having a little bit more time and they also need to be involved in community activities to feel worthwhile, like you asked in the previous question. So then that will help the women. And also if we have such care arrangements, we can also help this women's labor force participation issue, because a large proportion of this not being able to go to work is this care problem. And another is to look at the entire silver economy. I think Sri Lanka is not focusing at all on the silver economy. Silver economy meaning the production, distribution, consumption of goods and services for older population, because this population, we should not relegate them to be dependent. Some of them have a lot of money in their hands and they might need a lot of specific services and specific goods. And this care industry is growing. So we can do a lot of things around the silver economy, and then mostly the care workers are women. And if we can train them in abundance, because there's a huge demand for care workers from overseas also. And with this anticipation of going abroad, many people are getting trained and getting qualified as care workers. So they can be repurposed into the local market in anticipation of this growing care need in the marketplace in Sri Lanka. Because right now, we are not really focusing on providing market-based care solutions at large. So I think that is a good marriage between migration, some brain gain there, and then repurposing it to the local economy too.
So, let me just add to that. But, there is a big elephant in the room here, right? So, it's very good. And I've been in lots of discussions where, people say we need to train more people and raise the training standards, the qualification levels of these people, etc. And, create this economy. But the problem here is, if you look at the more advanced Asian capitalist economies, which includes China, I should say, because it's basically capitalist, and all the other Western capitalist economies, and even the middle income countries, this economy ultimately will depend on public money, right? And this is the elephant in the room. Because the general experience of, let's say, the rich countries right now, today, is that they are spending anywhere from 1% to 4% of their GDP, that's their national income, on this long-term care, which is not even the respite care, it's just even the older people who need even more support. And about 80% of that is public money, taxes, or it could be long-term insurance premiums, right? And our challenge is we don't spend anything. So that's why we don't have a lot of these workforce, we don't have a lot of the economy. And that is going to be very challenging for us, right? So if you think about, that's where developed countries are today. Well, they're older than us. But we're going to be as old as America in 2050, as old as America is today. And America actually has a relatively young population for various reasons, including migration, that we're going to be as old as America by 2035. We're going to be as old as America is today in just a decade's time, and we're going to be older, and of course America's going to get older. And so where is that money going to come from? When I talk about 1% to 3% of GDP, our whole health budget is just 2%. And we don't have the taxes. And so I think that I've been involved in these discussions about looking after older people. I've been working on aging, I have to say, for 30 years, so most of my professional life. But it's always, the discussions go around in circles, because the policy makers, the bureaucrats, the experts, even as I said, my doctor colleagues, don't want to talk about this issue that we will have to raise taxes if we're going to make a meaningful difference to people's lives. And that is a very sensitive topic in our country, more sensitive than it is in other countries. And I think this is the elephant in the room. So I think, I agreed to come here today and talk about some of these aging issues, but my impression is we'll just continue going around in circles until we confront the basic problem. Our country doesn't raise enough taxes to pay for the public goods and public services that we need. And we're going to need more of those as we move forward.
So throughout this conversation, the word migration was mentioned several times. Definitely it has a huge impact, which is why it was mentioned. So let's start talking about migration. Back then, people used to go abroad, work, and send the remittances in. But now, chances are high that people just leave entirely and don't think of coming back even. How exactly has this shaped our families, remittances, as well as community activities back here at home?
I'll go, yes. So Sri Lanka has traditionally been a temporary labor migration sending country. So we would expect them to work for 2-3 years, mainly 2 years, and come back. But now people are going with long-term intentions. They might say they're going as temporary migrant workers, but they want to step migrate to another country, or they just want to continue working. So what happens then? They will, as long as they are very attached to back at home, they will continue to send money at home. So how is this attachment going to be if they have the nuclear family back at home? But most often, skilled workers, they migrate with their family. When they don't have the nuclear family with them, and most likely their parents are affluent and they don't depend on the remittances, so then the remittance link is going to be weakened. And then this not only contributes to the remittance size, but then in terms of the population, now we are already an aging population and the younger cohorts are leaving. That contributes to the care burden, as it was mentioned earlier. And in another aspect, we would see that there is a changing aspiration of the younger people. Now, everybody is leaving. There's a herd effect. Let me also go. And then whoever's left behind is thinking, everybody's gone. If I remain back, am I the worst person? Maybe I should also go. So this whole narrative, this whole expectation, and the way we put this across has to be changed in a meaningful way going forward, because it's not temporary migration anymore. We see a large flow of students leaving. We don't even have statistics about how many students are leaving. That many. No, we don't collect statistics.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a very bad situation. That is our next generation, our workforce. If we don't know what skills are leaving the country and what sort of people are going where they're going, and we know many of these student migrants, they never come back. They find employment. So we need to understand the dimensions of migration in a real important way, because right now we only have statistics from the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment. With the latest trends in migration in the post-pandemic era, not many people go through registered migration. They go through various other channels and they're not registered. So we don't even know the number of migrant workers that we used to know. So now migration is becoming a lot like an unknown subject, and very little limited things are known. So that is going to have a lot of effects on how we plan for their return and reintegration, whether they will ever come back. How do we have to keep them connected with back at home? What sort of policies, activities need to be done? Because just because they left and they are not having intentions of coming back, we should not cut them off. We can still gain a lot. There's a lot of potential to be harnessed by staying engaged with them. We can show them their importance in terms of remittances to the community if their family is not there, and then some sense of giving back to the country or the community, because most of them would have received public education, free public education. So that is an investment that Sri Lanka has made. So it's very important to remain connected with them, and we need to find innovative ways to stay connected with this population of Sri Lankans leaving the country.
Yeah, I'll just comment a bit on that. I think in the migration, there are probably two groups, right? The people who go for a short time, or the ones who went to the Gulf,
Yes.
Saudi or Kuwait or places like this, and then they tended to be lower skilled. The more educated professionals, even before probably smaller numbers, they went permanently. And now what we see is students, recent graduated students who are leaving. And certainly I hear from my university colleagues, they can't find students to take up the junior positions, and junior faculty are leaving. It is a really serious problem in the education system. So I think that's true. But I will make one observation about this migration. I think that, we're addicted to it as a society, right? It's a cultural problem, right? I came back from my doctoral studies, 20 years ago. And people sort of think, oh, why are you here? It's like, you failed, right? If you haven't migrated, which I think we were saying, you failed because you haven't migrated, right? It's a social psychosis in my view. And then people say, I've been here 20 years. I've been working full-time in Sri Lanka for 20 years. And people say, but are you here for a short time? No, it's like...
I know. I know exactly what you're saying.
Right? Because they can't figure that out, right? That why would I be here? So it is a social psychosis, but it is actually a serious problem. And I want to just talk about something which doesn't get talked about. It's true that the remittances on a short-term basis keep a lot of families or the relatives, it raises their living standards. They get this money. But in the long run, my view is it has made the country poorer. Because what it's done is, and this is sort of, I don't know, before we start, you asked about statistics, but I'll share one. We get $6-7 billion a year from remittances. Yeah. This is more than our manufactured goods exports. Right? I did this, and I did a check a few years ago. It was more than the total private sector wage bill in the formal sector. So households in Sri Lanka get more money by shipping people abroad than working to produce stuff to earn money for the country, or by other means. So now, what does this effect has? It has a huge macroeconomic effect. We have an overinflated exchange rate. It undermines export industry. And we know from the rest of Asia, from our cousins in Asia, every Asian country that got rich did it through exports. Unless you're sitting on gas and oil or a beach like the Maldives, pretty much everyone has to go through that export and manufacturing. We have devastated our export manufacturing, right? The 70s and 80s, we were beginning to grow very fast. The remittances started to come on stream. And then since the 80s, it's been pretty pathetic, our export growth. That's why we ended up in an economic crisis. We ran out of foreign exchange. Our living standards today are lower than 10 years ago. So my kind of view on this, now I know why people migrate. It's because they rationally understand the opportunities for them are better abroad, right? So we have to recognize that. But that reflects, I think, a very long-term failure by the country, by our governments, and this is not any party, it's all the parties, to build an economy that grows and has productive employment demand, creates jobs. And so we've ended up exporting our people. Now, when we talk about aging, one of the problems it creates for us is now we're going to have all these older people, and we're all going to be in that position. Some of us in this room will be needing care, right? We'll need people to wash us and do that thing, that's going to happen. And we need people to look after us. But what are we doing? We're exporting people to wash other people in other countries. We're even proud to train people to literally go and wash people's bottoms in other countries. I'm going to be fairly blunt here, right? And we think that's great. The politicians will think it's great because we get foreign exchange. But then what about us? The people who stay behind. This is not a development policy. This is a road to ruination, as it has been for the past 20 years. So I think the problem for us with aging is we have to do a very fundamental change in our growth trajectory. We have to raise long-term economic growth. If we don't do that, the rest of Asia will get richer and we will get poorer. So, of course, we'll end up being their servants and domestics. That's all we can do, right? That's all we're good for, really, even now, half the time. And so we have to reverse that trajectory. And I think the remittances has been a hindrance. And we have to figure out how do we grow our economy, make people richer without the remittances or despite the remittances, so that people don't want to leave anymore. And actually, many of them will want to stay. And I think this is the really big challenge that we face, I think, in the overall aging picture. Yes, we have aging. Everyone has aging around the world. But to get ourselves into a better position, we have to deal with this fundamental problem of low economic growth.
I think to touch on what Ravi said, if you look at the micro level within a household, let's say a very low socioeconomic setting, that mainly a woman might get an opportunity to go abroad. But what really happens is when she goes abroad, her husband will not continue to be employed. What happens is he will kind of think the money is coming home. I don't have to work so hard. It's already a free flow of finances coming in, or else he will have to take leave to go for the parents' meeting of the child, to take care of the mother and all those things. And then eventually he will not have the time to invest in his labor market activities. So then the two incomes that they were expecting is coming down to one income, which is a remittance income. So that contributes to the economic downturn or not being contributing enough. So that is why we need all these options to make sure that if somebody goes abroad, there is a good plan in the household that the husband does not fall out from working, and there is some social upliftment within the plan, that they're not going to go around in circles and stay in the same position, and there are care arrangements for the elderly and the children, and everything is a planned, purposeful activity at the national level and at the micro level, so that we will reach the expected economic development without just relying or over-relying on remittances in the short term.
So, I think that, just to stress, the issue of the remittances, they're so big. They're about 10% of GDP, right?
About 8%
of GDP, right? You can't have that inflow without damaging our long-term growth prospects, right? The exchange rate today is basically 300 to the dollar. If we didn't have half those remittances, which would be, let's say we vanished 3 billion rupees or $3 billion in remittances, exchange rate would be 500. I'm guessing, right? Somebody can do the calculations. And if it was at 500, yes, in short run, our living standards fall, right? And we can't buy foreign stuff. But it would be a huge boost for those sectors of the economy which can create real jobs by exporting, which is what Asia has been doing, right? Okay, we just got hit by these Trump tariffs. I don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow.
Oh, yes, the letters are on the way.
The letters on the way. But, the challenge, we did get this very high Trump, but this tariff of whatever it was, 40 odd percent. But actually, all those other Asian countries that were on that list, Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, they've been doing phenomenally well in export growth, way better than us, right? And we are in a much worse position, right? They've exploited that market access to the US for past 20 years. We have not. And so we really need to figure out how do we deal with these remittances, right? How do we get the policy in place to grow export industry, right? And the other thing about the dollars that come in are actually, I mean, yes, people live off those dollars, but in some at a macro level, my guess is we have to find a way of essentially not bringing those dollars in, sterilizing them, right? And what many Asian countries, not because of remittances, because they had huge export surpluses, which we should not talk about too loudly in case Trump is listening to this, right? But what they did was they bought US Treasury bonds, Treasury bills. They sanitized it to prevent the exchange rate effects. And so from a macroeconomics point of view, I think we really have to understand that migration has not been a help. We have to figure out, create the export opportunities, but we also have to think about how we reduce the effects on the exchange rate, which hurts exporters. And I think that's a very big challenge, a politically very sensitive and very difficult topic to deal with. But I think unless we deal with it, we're just going to end up being poorer and poorer relative to the rest of our Asian neighbors. And, maybe one day we're so poor we'll send people to Bangladesh to work for them. No, I'm being serious, right? I mean, in the past decade, Vietnam has become richer than us. They used to be poorer.
Yeah.
Cambodia, I was there recently. They're on track to overtake us. After genocide and after Pol Pot, they're on track to overtake us. Even Bangladesh isn't doing that badly. So is that the future we want? So I think we have to think about that. That puts us in a better position to deal with aging.
Let's talk about the migrant workers now. Usually behind almost every migrant worker, there's a family that has to make immense sacrifices. There are children who get to spend less time with their parents. There are older parents who are waiting for their children back at home. How can we ease this strain on them while also reaping the benefits of migration at the same time? Can we strike a balance?
It's very hard. I have first-hand experience because right now, I'm a left behind migrant worker family member because my husband is overseas and I'm managing my job and 3 kids and managing the house, which is very challenging. One thing is there is this parental attention deficit that cannot be matched. There is a lot of technology developments now, like you can have a FaceTime call or whatever technology and call and speak to your children and stay connected with your family members. But still, there are certain aspects that you miss in having both parents around or being with your children. So those things cannot be bridged with technology alone. But then there are new technologies that's adopted in other countries like digital family management platforms, where you can share the calendars of the children and the parents, and then they allow you to virtually attend parents' meetings or things like that. So while these technological developments are there, some of these things have to be harnessed so that the burden is less on the people left behind. So another thing is that, especially with elderly population left behind and waiting for their children to come and care for them, it's very difficult for them to come. But what happens is our health system is relatively okay, but for a migrant who's overseas, for them to make a decision about an elderly family member, it's very hard to get involved. There we have to have some platforms or mechanisms where these health decisions can be jointly made with the overseas person. And with the pandemic, as I said, now we have teleconsultations and video consultations. Maybe extend it a little bit so that the overseas family member also can involve in this consultation and provide some inputs about or make decisions about the healthcare needs of the elderly or the young children or their educational decisions. At the family level, these can happen with technology, but when there is a education institution or a hospital involved, it's difficult to get involved in real time. So we can facilitate those. And then for the left behind family members, a big need is psychosocial support. There has to be a lot of understanding, the community level understanding and support for them to manage all and take on all these gender roles when they are, maybe it will be a husband when the wife has gone abroad that has to take care of the entire family aspect, or it will be the other way around. So some support at the community level in a formalized way would be helpful, because right now what people do is mostly run to their extended family or their social circle and rely on them. If we are so dependent on migrants and remittances. I think we have to give them back some support for the families about how to manage and bridge this absence. Some people who are able to afford would hire labor in the marketplace, but some are not able to do that, maybe hire a maid or a driver to bridge this gap. But not everybody is able to do that. If you go to do that, whatever the benefit you are going to get from remittances is going to be a trade-off. So there has to be some arrangements formalized to help the left behind family. I'll contribute more later.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you about, I mean, this issue of the cost to children, the cost to families, the cost to society of this pattern of migration, which is sort of not the whole family unit moves. It's part of it. But, you know, it's been there for a long time. I mean, we've been, again, I've been discussing this. I've been hearing about this discussion for 30 years. And I don't think there's a magic solution to this, right? I think what we should, and I think now, after all these years, what I think is we have to go back to basics. And as I said before, we have to think about how we shift from that mode of development where we're addicted to migration to a mode of development which means creating real jobs in our economy for people to make stuff to send to people abroad, not for people to go abroad and work in jobs. So we have to shift from exporting our bodies to exporting goods and stuff or services. And that is really the only kind of the big solution. But I think otherwise it's always going to come up with all these social and family challenges always going to be there. I mean, I don't think there's any way we can just get rid of it. So I think we need a reorientation, and we need a shift from trying to maybe mitigate to trying and resolve the underlying issue, which is we didn't have jobs for these people. How do we get those jobs?
But then I also want to contribute that despite this absence of a parent, there has been a lot of positive impact also from migration. There has been better educational outcomes for children. If the parent had not gone abroad, they wouldn't have been able to achieve such educational outcomes. Similarly, health and nutritional outcomes, there have been much better quality of life, sanitation, housing. So there are some positive contributions also. So it's always difficult to weigh the trade-off and see which way it is tipping.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge here is that there are benefits at the micro level for the family, for the individual, for the village, shall we say. And that's true in the short run. But there is a huge net, I think in my view, a net societal cost and loss from this. And so politicians focus on the micro because, if these people got jobs, they have higher incomes in our village, or my voters, politicians are incredibly happy to advertise and appear on TV to say that they have signed an agreement to send, 1,000 Sri Lankans to Korea or something. Like this happens all the time, right? And they're not so motivated to create jobs here. And this is what I said, we're addicted to this migration as a solution. I think we have to understand that, yes, I agree with you, it has significant individual family benefits, because that's why they do it, right? I mean, people are not stupid. They migrate because at some basic level, they and their families are better off. But we have to figure out, how do we create the incentives where they don't need to do that? How do we get to a situation where the whole society is better off? And I think that is a thing that we have to really tackle.
I think the main thing is migration has to be a choice. It doesn't have to be a necessity. If we have decent jobs, if we have employment opportunities, if we have enough opportunities within the country, people won't be compelled to leave. We have to get to that point, because migration is not going to go away. Migration is going to happen.
And it's a right.
Yes.
We all have a right to citizens to leave.
We all have the right to leave. But we have to find the right kind of migration so that it is a choice. Nobody is pushed or compelled to leave the country. And if they wanted, they can come back and still start over and continue a good life, not go back to where they started. So that sort of opportunities have to come. Then only migration will be meaningful.
So before we wrap up today's conversation, Now, we talked about all these shifts that need to happen in society. And, although they are not exactly possible in the short run, they should be done in order to adapt to all of these demographic shifts in the long run. How exactly can we create conversation on this within our household so that absolutely anyone who is part of our household would understand what exactly is going on here? And also on that note, if there is anyone elderly who is feeling isolated, or someone who is at doubt on whether to stay or leave, or be it a younger person or an older person, is there a gentle reminder or a message that you would like to convey them?
Okay, about the conversation, I think we have to have a very honest conversation about this disproportionate care burden on women. If our parents took care of me and my brother both, why do I have to take more burden in caring for my parents? I think if I'm also a working woman, we have to change the narrative. It has been going on. That's all right. Let's start now. We can raise our children, the boys, to say, okay, I expect you to take care of me when I grow old. But right now the expectation by the elderly community is, no, he's a boy. He can't take care of me. I have my daughter. Let my daughter take care of me. Let's change the narrative. And then the brother in the family will think, oh, Nangi's there, Aki's there. They will take care of Ammi and Tati. We have to change the narrative. Everybody have a role to play in this caring. A lot has changed. Men contribute a lot in childcare roles now. But this adult care role, there's a lot more to be done. So I think one honest conversation is that we have to do. And you wanted to know about what to tell if somebody was leaving the country, right?
Or if they are feeling
Thinking
confused in any way regarding this.
There might be a lot of opportunities out there in other countries, but it comes with a lot of uncertainty and risk. You have to always evaluate the risk against the return or the gain you're going to make, whether if you stay back, what are the sacrifices you're going to make? What is the opportunity cost? Whether it's compensated by going away and not seeing your family for 2 years, whether not being able to be at your child's parent meeting or not being able to be with your mother's medical appointment. So put a cost for all that and understand. And then also, there's a lot of scamming going on in recruitment for foreign employment. Most of them go for employment. And we know how people suffer when they're trafficked. So you have to be very careful. You have to check, double check, recheck about this recruitment, about your employer. Even though if it is through an informal, known contact, there's a high possibility that you can be duped. So be very careful if you're going overseas and think of the risks, uncertainty, and the benefit and the gain you're going to take. Just don't make a rash decision, make a calculated decision.
Yeah, I just pick up on just some personal experience on the latter issue. I mean, in our institute, we employ a lot of skilled young graduates from local universities, and I know that when we recruit people like that, half of them will leave. Very few of them leave to other firms or institutions. They leave the country, right? And so that's almost kind of baked into our human resource planning, and it's very difficult to know what to tell them, right? I mean, if you're a young graduate with a good degree, particularly in a STEM subject like science or whatever, or quantitative subjects, yes, for most of them, they are better off leaving, right? And so it's not something, I've learned, it's not something you can fight. It's just going to happen. And I don't know what to tell them. I don't have right now, and I actually had a conversation with somebody yesterday, came to see me. Somebody wants to return, which is thinking about returning. They have some new degree and whatever. And I was quite blunt with him. I said, you need to think carefully about why people don't come back, right? And so I don't have an optimistic message. And this is the sad thing. I don't have, and I can't be dishonest with them by saying, you won't, maybe you should stay, you'll be better off. No, I know it's not true. You have to have a very strong motivation to stay if you're very skilled. And that can only be resolved at the societal level. And so, what I would say to the viewers would be, or the people listening, we don't have we don't have a positive message right now for these people, right? The country is losing these young people. We're losing this human capital. We as a society have to figure out how do we get this economy of ours back on track, not to where it was before, but back on track to rapid growth like the rest of Asia. Asian countries have shown it's possible to grow, to become rich, to catch up with Western countries, right? That's why Trump's not happy these days, right? And many Americans. And that's what we need to do. And we need to figure that out, because otherwise, till I retire, I don't have a good message to say. I can only say good luck, essentially. But I don't have a convincing argument for many of them to stay, right? And I have to be honest with them. So I think that for me, at my late stage in life, I'm still working, fortunately, is something that I hope that particularly the younger people, well, maybe not the younger people, there may be many of the people watching may be going as well. But I think as a society, we have to figure that out. This has become increasingly urgent as a society. How do we fix our slow growth? How do we get back to rapid growth?
Well, Sri Lanka's story is changing indeed, but behind every statistic that we see is a real person, a real family, real choices, and real hope for a better future. So thank you very much, Dr. Ravi and Dr. Bilesha, for sitting down with us for this very honest and open conversation, for sharing your insights with us. Well, may we keep listening, planning, and caring for each other so that we can build a better, stronger society. And no matter our age, whoever we are, wherever we live, wherever we plan on going, we will always have a safe place to go and a voice in this future that we are all striving to build. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, see you.